Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. We are continuing the series of going into a deep dive with every NBA team before this upcoming season. This episode, we are going to be focusing on the Phoenix Suns, another interesting team going into this season, coming off of a very disappointing year to some, losing and getting swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round of the playoffs. But I think we can kind of wash that year away because this is a big make-or-break year, kind of like the Clippers, for the Phoenix Suns. I love some of the stuff they've done in this offseason with kind of the limited assets and moves they had to use. So looking at this, they just picked up Tyus Jones like last week on a minimum contract. It's like 1 year, like $3 million. That's kind of a bet on himself kind of year for Tyus Jones to try to get him a long-term extension. I thought he was still playing good enough in Washington to get that long-term extension from a team, but good thing for the Phoenix Suns. He's taking this 1 year minimum deal to come and be the starting point guard for them, which is something they desperately need. And they already acquired Monte Morris as well. So now you have two real ball steady point guards, and Tyus Jones is still one of the best assist turnover ratio guards in the league. When you look at when he was with Washington, he still was one of the best in the league and how bad Washington was in terms of assist and turnover ratio. So love the Tyus Jones and Monte Morris pickups. Mason Plumlee as well. Love that pickup. I think he's just a great veteran big off your bench, and I think he can kind of give you a different kind of look compared to a use of Nurkic, especially defensively. I think he can just be better defensively than Nurkic can at times. Coach Bud is the big-time hire. I think they're kind of switching the gears. I think Frank Vogel was very a defensive-minded coach, and with this Phoenix Suns roster not really being the most defensive-heavy unit, I think making a coaching change here made sense. Coach Bud is more offensive-oriented, and I think offensively this team could take another jump, and they were already pretty good offensively last year, but it really just kind of fell apart in terms of the turnovers and kind of late game situations, in terms of them not having a real true point guard. I know Devin Booker was really good when it came to playing the point guard position, but I feel like you want Devin Booker to be more of a scorer compared to setting everybody else up, because I feel like he at times is their best scorer, even with Kevin Durant being on the team. So looking at this, you draft Ryan Dunn, who I really like. He's one of the best defensive prospects we've seen in some time out of the draft right away on the wing. And then Iguodala in the second round, which is a great kind of passing, facilitating big out of Marquette. He might be somewhat G League kind of in the rotation as well, depending on what kind of injuries happen. But I do think Ryan Dunn can really carve his way out a nice role in this rotation. When it comes to looking at this starting five, it's kind of interesting because this kind of go into like my main question that I have at the end of the video. So me personally, I think the starting five should be Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal at your 2 and your 3, Kevin Durant at your 4, and Jusuf Nurkic at your 5. But I do think there's going to be times where that starting 5 isn't good enough defensively. Tyus Jones even coming in and being a great point guard that he is when it comes to on the playmaking side of things. Defensively, he's not the greatest defender in the world. So you're pairing him up with 3 guards at your 1, 2, and 3. Your best defender is really probably Kevin Durant. And looking at this, you don't really have too many things off your bench to really work with. But offensively, this unit should be very good. I think Coach Bud's going to kind of change this outlook on this team offensively, and it's going to be very good next season. So looking at what you do have off your bench, you have Grayson Allen, you have Ryan Dunn, Iguodala, Royce O'Neal, Josh Okogie, Nasir Little, Monte Morris now. So you have a bunch of different guys that are kind of Swiss Army knife kind of guys. I really think Josh Okogie is on the brink of being a really solid role player. I think Royce O'Neal fits this team perfectly with his 3-and-D capabilities, but I think the key is going to be Ryan Dunn and how can they kind of hide those offensive deficiencies to get him on the court, because I think him as a point of attack defender is going to be really nice. I think he can confidently guard 1 through 4 with his size and his length. I think he's the key. They have to find a way to get him on the court because he is the only real guy on this roster that I look at as somebody who can really stop guys on the defensive end, especially with how he can just get up and down the court athletically as well. Maybe they can find a way with this great offensive unit to hide some of those offensive deficiencies. So looking at this, in terms of an X factor, it has come down to Bradley Beal. I think Devin Booker and Kevin Durant had 2 phenomenal seasons last year once again. But Bradley Beal dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the course of the regular season and then had a really bad postseason against the Minnesota Timberwolves. he was kind of just struggling to really find his role, and he was never really able to find it because of all the injuries stacking up against him throughout the year. So I feel like this year going in, a healthy season for Bradley Beal could really change the narrative on how people talk about him, how people think about him. But I do think Bradley Beal is the X factor because he is the kind of the odd man out to where like your 1 and 2 is KD and D Book. He needs to kind of figure out his role and find his niche on this team. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see where that fit happens because now with the bringing of Tyus Jones and Monte Morris, now you have your guard room is completely loaded. Tyus Jones, Monte Morris, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Grayson Allen, who had a phenomenal year last year. So like, where do they pivot and move on from? Because I think the problem was with this Phoenix Suns team, they have too many guys that do the same thing, and they kind of need to kind of pivot and go get something that they don't have, which is more size on your wing and your big position, especially somebody that can switch multiple positions and somebody that can really sit down and guard and be able to play off the ball. That's somebody I feel like they're missing. I like Royce O'Neal. He's getting up there in age, and I still feel like he's a little undersized. Like when you're thinking about the Western Conference, you got to have size at that front court position. You can't be going in with like 3-guard lineups, which is what the Phoenix Suns roll out there a lot of the times because these teams in the Western Conference are big. A lot of bigger teams out in this Western Conference, and I feel like them not really having a defensive-minded big can hurt them in terms of them not having a lot of size. So looking at this, I think they could look to pivot into trading Grayson Allen. I think Grayson Allen could be the odd man out on this team, and they could strike while the iron is hot, especially with the year he had last year. I know they just extended him, but you bring in Tyus Jones on such a team-friendly deal to where your most valuable asset in terms of outside of your big three is probably Grayson Allen with his shooting ability in the year he's coming off of. So maybe you could flip Grayson Allen into something that could really benefit and help your team out now. I know Grayson Allen is really good with this team, especially his ability to space, but I feel like if you can pivot and flip him for something that you could desperately need, maybe a wing with some more size, possibly trading him at the deadline. But I feel like you got to kind of strike while the iron's hot. And the team could really like Grayson Allen because shooting is at a premium in this league. But the Phoenix Suns have shooting everywhere. Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant are all good shooters in your starting lineup. So you looking at this, Grayson Allen is kind of in a weird spot to where like there's a lot of guys at his position that are going to have to play over him. Like Tyus Jones is going to have to play over Grayson Allen at that point guard spot. At times, same with Monte Morris. Now looking at that, you're obviously taking Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. They need to play. So like looking at Grayson Allen, you could trade him and possibly go get some more front court depth, which is something I think they desperately need. But getting into the expectations I have for this team coming off of a really good offseason, I think they definitely need to go get some size. I think they still need to make a move. Now what that move is, I don't know. It depends on what the deadline is looking like, especially how the NBA landscape changes around the deadline. So a bunch of different people can become available that aren't available right now. So looking at that, I think that that's going to be the same kind of thing that this Phoenix Suns team struggles with. But in terms of what I think their expectation is now going into this year, I think Tyus Jones, Monte Morris, they're going to really help clean up the turnovers in the late game situation. That was a big problem for the Phoenix Suns. They were one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the league last year. So looking at that, I expect this team to still be in the realm of where they were last year, top of the plan, maybe a 6-5 seed around there if they still stay healthy. But if you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal all healthy, I can see a world and possibility where this team is a top 5 to 6 team out west with all that talent. And offensively, I think this is going to be one of the better units in the league next year, just because I feel like Coach Bud compared to Frank Vogel, two different coaches and two different mindsets around how this Phoenix Suns team could look. And I feel like that's going to be a big X factor as well, outside of Bradley Beal, which I had as my X factor, is Coach Bud and how he kind of gets this team looking defensively and offensively compared to what they looked like with Frank Vogel. I expect them to be probably the 6 or 7 seed. And with this team, I am perfectly fine with them possibly winning one playing game to make the playoffs. Even last year, they were the 6th seed for the face of Minnesota Timberwolves. So, like, looking at that, I think this roster looks better than it did last year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if this team is healthy, a top 5 to 6 unit out west once again. In terms of the main question I do have for this upcoming season for the Phoenix Suns, I think this is kind of going into you guys, and kind of let me know in the comments what you guys think about this question, is should Bradley Beal come off the bench this season? I think it's definitely a question that could come up because of kind of the lineup. Like, I could see a world where you have Ryan Dunn with his defensive ability in the starting lineup to add some more defense to that starting lineup, because Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal are all not the greatest defenders in the world. Devin Booker has taken strides, but that still, I don't think, is enough. And I think Bradley Beal could be the guy to where you're like, maybe we should pivot. I know he's making a ton of money. Maybe we should pivot and have him come off the bench and then, like I said, trade Grayson Allen to try to bring in some more defensive help, especially in that front court. So that's kind of the question I have for the Phoenix Suns going into this upcoming season. But that is all I have for this episode of Let's Talk About It. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.